Okay.
Good. Okay. And my name is Jordy Izzard, and I am an Alumni Relations Officer at SAIS, and I am here with Scott Mills today, who graduated from SAIS in the class of 1948. And today's date is April 22nd, 2011, and I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you. I'm
Sure.
glad to be here.
Well, great.
Glad to have you
Yeah.
to talk to.
Great. And we're gonna just kind of have a conversation and go down memory lane. And why don't we just start with what originally brought you to SAIS?
All right. I was, after 3 years in the Navy, I came back to Grinnell College in Iowa for my senior year of college. And when I was in the last weeks before graduation, I looked in the administrative office and saw a poster that showed SAIS, and I said to myself, not knowing what I was going to be doing next year, but why don't I check this out? So I wrote SAIS a letter, and that's how I got here.
That's great. And tell us a little bit about what your memories were when you were at SAIS.
Well, I remember that we came to a big house on Florida Avenue, and I found out soon that most of the students lived there, and that we ate there too. And I was assigned a roommate from Puerto Rico, and his name was Angel Gonzalez.
That's great.
So that was interesting, and we soon ate together and got acquainted with each other. It seemed to me there were only 35 or 40 students, and most of them were living right there, and most had roommates, and everybody got acquainted pretty well with each other.
Did you stay friends with Angel?
We kept friends with a number of them.
That's great. And what else do you remember?
The thing I remember, I believe, first was everybody was assigned research papers, and that involved using the Library of Congress. And of course that was convenient because of public transportation to get there and back. And so many of us did research, individual research on our own for the first time in our lives. So that was interesting. And I remember one of our professors was Donald Hiss, who was in the news because of his father, Alger Hiss, being caught up in Senator McCarthy's accusations. So, but nobody said brought out any comments about Donald Hiss, although just rumors were that whatever bothered his brother was also probably bothered him.
How about other professors? Do you remember any?
Professor Haynes was diplomatic history, Grove Haynes, and he was very scholarly, and eventually he was important to me because he, for one thing, I remember with gratitude that he wanted me to keep on with him and go for a doctorate, which I didn't think so much of then, but I realized was quite a compliment that he wanted me to. But in any case, he did give me the contact that got me a job with the Army Intelligence and the Pentagon.
That's wonderful. And you didn't want to go on to get your PhD
No,
at
I
that
didn't
time?
want to.
Yeah.
I'd never had a job really except being in the Navy.
So you graduated from SAIS in
Mm-hmm.
1948. Do you remember what the historical context was at that time? Was there anything? It was
No,
post World War II, and what else was going on during that era?
well, I guess this is of interest, and it may have come just a year afterwards, or I'm not sure exactly when. But Harry Truman won his upset victory in 1948, in which the Chicago Tribune printed a Dewey victory already, and all the time Truman himself had predicted victory in all the states that he won, which was enough, plenty to win. And so I was in my first job at the Pentagon, and I got off to see Truman come back from his parade, from his election, and come down Pennsylvania in his triumphant motorcade. And there were a couple kids, teenage kids, up in a tree watching, and so I climbed up too, so I could get a good look.
Oh, that's great.
So that was quite a fun thing to. Of course, I was for Truman to win anyway, but then to get that close to it seemed great.
That's fun. And then tell us so Professor Haynes helped you get your first job. And tell us a little bit about how your career started and then later evolved.
It was kind of a humdrum job at the Pentagon, but it was easy to do and paid well, and I just enjoyed it for a while because I'd been in the Navy and studying all my life so far, and here I was getting paid for something.
That's
So,
wonderful. Where did that lead you after that?
I was just trying to think what happened exactly after that. I think I stayed there in that job, but got a little more responsibility for some time, and then I got another job from them called Army Correlation Center, which was a way to obtain intelligence by sound. They had arrays of whatever. Anyway, it was a way to detect Soviet launch sites because of the blast that it made in the when it penetrated the this atmosphere. I'm not very good in words on that.
That's okay. That's okay. And what else did you do in your career?
Oh. Well, I went out. I got a civilian job for a couple aerospace companies out in California, and when I came back, supposedly to help sell some aerospace equipment, why I got in touch with one of my old office mates in the Pentagon who was working for NASA. So he got me a job there. So I moved back to Washington, and came back to Goddard Space Flight Center.
Uh-huh.
So, and there I had pretty much fun doing different things. But I ended up being the editor of design criteria manuals that were given to companies who got contracts with NASA to do things.
Uh-huh.
Like I edited and put out about 15 different environmental criteria manuals for a particular project. Like for Mars would be the particular environments that a contractor would have to design against.
Uh-huh.
So that gave me a chance to contact other NASA centers to get the experts in the particular parameters that had to be put together. And so that was the job I ended up with and that I liked the most.
And how long were you there?
Well, 10, 12, 15 years, something like that.
And that was your favorite part of your career, would you say? What was your favorite part of that job?
Oh, contact the different scientists and writing up the best estimates of what they were doing.
Now, and when did you retire then?
Well, I was about 55, but I've forgotten.
Oh, no, that's okay. Because I was going to bring up that you've since written a book, or you've edited a book at least.
Yeah, I did the books afterwards.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that part of your career. You wrote several books.
Well, it got started the day after I retired. My daughter had been going to an academy up in northern Maryland called West Nottingham Academy that was founded before the Revolution and had been going ever since, and it had never been written up as a history. And so I did a history of it. Its founder, a Presbyterian minister, educated 2 signers of the Declaration of Independence. So it was a kind of a fun thing to follow all the way through.
Sure. So that was one book? And what else?
Well, this gets kind of connected with the Pacific War again. Don Bell wanted me to write this. He's the
Stranded in the Philippines.
Yeah, he was the son of the family stranded there, and they had been rescued by a submarine, American submarine, finally, and I happened to go to a reunion they had of all the people who'd been rescued by that submarine. And I ran into a couple American soldiers who had been rescued and who had been prisoners of war. So I did a couple books, of one book on each for them.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It was fun.
Yeah, and what was your favorite book experience?
Well, I'm working on one now.
What are you working on?
I'm working on the memoirs of the American diplomat in Berlin during the wall crisis. you have a piece of the wall down there.
Yes.
He was the top diplomat there in Berlin at the time, and he also had an interesting career going back to Soviet Union before the Soviets got in the war even, and then he was sent to Norway right after the Germans had taken it, and so he observed the German occupation of Norway.
And what about what other parts of your what are you doing now? Are you just writing books, or are there other parts of your career you've expanded?
No, that's really all I'm doing,
No,
and
that's
I don't
great.
do that all the time.
That's okay. No, that's quite a bit. You've written, how many books in total have you written?
Let's see, about 4. I'm on number 5.
5. That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah. So you've accomplished quite a bit in your time, and you still are. And tell us a little bit about, in thinking about current students today who are at SAIS, given your vast experiences in the world and all you've done for it, what advice might you have for them now?
Well, I just applaud what I notice when I go down there for the lectures and so forth. That I think it's so valuable to have that kind of experience, and I'm very conscious of how important American policy has been since the war, by being involved in trying to keep things under, well, right now I'm sort of interested in the Berlin Wall and in the crisis we had with the Soviet Union, and how American policy has been continuously had to balance itself against Khrushchev and Stalin, each different, but each a big challenge, and yet we never gave up on Berlin, even though there were 2 very critical times. One right after the war, when we had when with the Soviet occupied territory surrounded Berlin, Stalin wanted to drive us out, but Truman again, who turned out to be a big hero, authorized General Clay to send in fleets of airplanes to keep a city of over a million and a half or 2 million alive for a year, even though they had no ground transport. And of course, the Soviets finally gave up on trying to block all ground transport. And then 10 years later, my current diplomat that I'm writing about was in London part of that time as a less important, lower rank diplomat, but still important. But in the Berlin Wall crisis, 10 years later, the Soviets were, under Khrushchev, were still trying to drive us out and still unable to, and so he was president in all that kind of thing. But in the bigger picture, I think it's so important that the United States, since World War II, has tried to stay in Europe and hold back from an aggressive Russia and bolster Europe, while as after World War I, not only we couldn't even get started. We couldn't even join the League of Nations because of the refusal of the Republican Congress to let President Wilson join the League of Nations and start doing what Truman and Marshall did after World War II.
What else? What other advice would you give students?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to put a finger on it, except to be flexible intellectually and willing to. And I think the current aspect is completely right in being challenging in your own mind and not hesitant in taking on new projects or challenges.
Good. That's wonderful. Well, great. And we just want to thank you so much for giving of your time today, and appreciated hearing your stories, and you've done wonderful things in your career. And thanks so much for sharing with SAIS and for all you've done with the world and all the books you're writing, and it's been a pleasure. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And have a wonderful day.
Okay.